Hello and welcome to the fourth and final episode on geometry management within the Tkinter library. We've seen how to use the pack command, and then we've seen how to use the grid command and treat our window as if it were a grid. Now the last command we will look at is place. What this does is basically allows a free-for-all. Namely, we can place our label wherever we want on the screen, independently of where the other labels are placed, and so with complete freedom. We can do this by writing label1.place and then giving it two main arguments, x equals, for example, 20 and y equals, 70. Then we can do label2.place and we can say x equals 50 and y equals 150. We can run the code and you can see that now our labels have been placed correctly, namely at 20 pixels from the left hand side and 70 pixels from the top for our label 1 and 50 pixels from the left hand side and 150 pixels from the top for our label 2. This, of course, is called absolute positioning. Namely, we give the place command exact details as to how many pixels from the left and from the top we want our label to be at. However, we can also give it so-called relative positioning using the rel(x) and rel(y) commands. And these will no longer be integer values, but they will be decimal values. For example, 0.2, 0.3, and then 0.5 and 0.7. Now, taking the dimensions of our window in the x and y direction respectively as a reference, we can say that label 1 will be placed 20% of the way from the left-hand side and 30% of the way down from the top. Similarly, label 2 will be placed 50% of the way from the left-hand side and 70% of the way from the top. We can again run the code and you can see that these have both been placed correctly. 20% and 30% and then 50% and 70%. Of course, you might also be asking yourself, well, this is all well and good, but when you say place however many pixels from the left and from the top, or a given percentage from the left or from the top, what do you exactly mean? What is this referring to? Well, we know that the references for our window are the leftmost side and the topmost side, but what are our references for our label? Well, these can actually be different, and of course are given by a familiar command which you should remember from a previous episode called anchor. This gives us a point of reference within our label to which our pixels or our percentage is calculated. The default value for this is a center, namely our values will be calculated to the center of our label, but we can of course use values such as north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. We can try this by writing anchor equals, for example, north, and anchor equals southwest. We can run the code again, and these have now been taken as the new reference points in placing our labels. Of course, you can't really appreciate it here because the scale is a bit too small. However, on larger projects, this can sometimes be particularly useful in ensuring that the labels line up with each other, for example, by taking the east side of the label as a reference to line them all up in a column, or the north side to line them all up in a row. Now with that, I hope you enjoyed this final video on geometry management within the Tkinter library. If you're enjoying this video series as a whole, then please make sure to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel to show your support. Also, feel free to check out my other tutorials and coding challenges, both of which are linked in the top of your screen and in the description below. Of course, feel free to write out any comments and questions you may have, and as usual, until next time, happy coding!